Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the LA launch of Flawless. We are so happy to have you here. Yay! Thank you. I want to first of all acknowledge that LAist is a nonprofit public media company operating within the traditional homelands of the Gabrielino Tongva people. Our operations are specifically based within their ancestral village of Hahamangna. And we want to recognize the painful past of displacement, settler colonialism, erasure of the people and their language, including place names and their sovereignty. And you can find a complete land acknowledgement statement at laist.com/land. You can also find out about the land where you live and work and find out about some amazing contemporary Indigenous artists in our resources page there. So I'd encourage you to check that out. Thank you. So let me do a couple of things. Yeah, the little claps, that's great. I want to do a couple of polls here. So who here listens to us at LAS 89.3? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Thank you. Keep doing that. Who reads our stories on LAist.com? Yes, 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 yes. And who listens to our podcast from LAist Studios? Amazing. So I want all of you to do more of that. And I also want to thank you so much for your support. It means the world to us. It means that we get to keep writing those stories, keep producing those pods, keep doing great events like this. If you feel so inclined, visit laist.com/give if you would like to donate to help us keep doing more of this. And we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Also, if you like events like this, please check us out at laist.com/events. We have a lot of great things coming up, so check back there, check often, sign up for our newsletter. We'll keep you informed. All right, and I have one more thing before we start. Some of you got giveaway tickets, enter to win tickets when you came in. So I'm gonna do a drawing right now for 2 giveaways of some K-Beauty products and a signed copy of the book. All right, so we have number 782615. Anyone have that one? 615? No? Yes, back here? Okay, excellent. Come on up. Okay. And then one more. Let's see. Last 3 numbers are 619, so pretty close. That's for you. 619? All right. Come on up. There you go. Congratulations. All right. So that's plenty of me talking. So now I want you to welcome our host for the evening, the host of NPR's All Things Considered, Ailsa Chang, and the host of TED Talks Daily, and the author of this gorgeous book, Elise Hu. Thank you.
Okay, airplane mode, Elise. We're like selfie queens, like taking our phones.
We're very online.
This is a very nice crowd. You guys came for us. We're very, very flattered. Thank you for those of you who traveled near and far in LA during rush hour. This is honestly quite flattering. So I am so excited to have this night with my very good friend Elise, because I have watched you write this book during the pandemic while we were all juggling so much madness. And she was homeschooling like 3 girls. And when I was reading this book, I was just like, how did she get all of this done? Because I watched from the outside and I was so impressed. So I'm very excited to talk about this book. But before I get to the actual book, I want to explain how Elise and I even know each other. So Elise and I, obviously, we're both from NPR, and we started reaching out to each other because of a thing that would happen. We would constantly get mistaken for each other. It turns out that there are some people at NPR who cannot tell Asian women faces apart. People would go up to Elise and congratulate her on stories about Congress that I did, and they would come up to me, oh my God, when Elise made the Seoul bureau chief job, when she was gonna open up the bureau in Seoul, I got emails from people inside NPR congratulating me on my move to Korea.
And I never got them, so I missed all those congratulations.
Yeah. I should have just been forwarding. And I hadn't known Elise that well, but then we slowly started reaching out to each other. Is this happening to you too? And she was getting the flip side of this experience. And then finally, at one point, Elise just puts a sign on her desk in her cubicle with a picture of me and a picture of her and an arrow pointing. I am not her.
We're like, this is Elise, this is Elsa.
Exactly.
But our friendship was born that way.
Our friendship was born. It takes just, nothing like a little racial insensitivity to forge a friendship. But I'm so glad.
It bonds you for life.
It does. It really does. But in so many ways, that experience, I kept like conjuring it back into my mind as I was reading this book because, we joke about how some people can't tell Asian faces apart. And this is a book about how there has been culturally this imposed homogeneity among Asian women faces, particularly in Korean society. And we're going to talk about the standards that continually have perpetuated that. But I guess my first question for you, Elise, is of all the topics that you could have written your very first book about, tell me why you landed on Asian beauty standards.
Great question. And before I answer, I just want to take a moment, a point of personal privilege, as they say, I guess maybe in Congress you would know, because you covered Congress and I did not. I covered tech. Just to thank all of you for being here. This is such an overwhelming feeling to me to not only finish putting out the book, and get to put it out there into the world, but then get to share it with so many of my friends. I see so many of you in the audience. So thank you for trekking, especially if you came from the West Side, which is basically, a foreign country. Special love to my friends who came from the West Side. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you to Becca and John and the whole LAist events team, Tony and the Kristens. This is an amazing setup.
Look at the colors.
The colors, the lights, the perfect sound. I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for hosting this big event tonight. And then it's AAPI Heritage Month too, so we're getting to end the month in high style here with a celebration of our sisterhood and our larger, broader sisterhood. And then Elsa too, of course. I will thank you at the end also. But
all right,
thank you for
prepping.
I wrote this book about beauty because it didn't exist, and I wished it would have existed when I went to Seoul. Before I got the Seoul posting, I had never spent any time in Korea. I'd never even done a layover at the Incheon airport. And I wanted to read up and understand the history and the relationship between South Korea and its neighbors and what was happening in the business world and culture and politically. And there were lots of books on that. But what was really stunning to me when I got there was just the gender disparity and how different it felt to be a woman occupying space in Korea versus a man. And I felt like my place was constantly having to be earned versus the place of men in society and the male journalists where they were just already in a club and their place was assumed. And I really noticed this, especially as a bureau chief, because the rest of the bureau chiefs tended to be white men and a lot of British white guys. I don't know why. And then they would get invited to all the clubby type things and at like the dinners at the ambassadors' houses, and I just wouldn't. I would constantly get excluded. And then when I tried to cover kind of national security type topics or politics, harder topics, and I would have to get into the Ministry of Defense, I was mansplained constantly, and then people would ask me, the Korean sources would ask me, like, well, where is your bureau chief? Where is your boss? And I'd have to explain, no, I am the boss. And it didn't compute. It was like, no, the person who's in charge.
Right.
No, I understand what boss means. That's still me, But then
numero uno right here.
But I was appearing very pregnant too at the time because when I moved, I was also I was in my most feminine state.
Right.
And so there was a lot of that. And this was just like my daily experience, and I didn't think there was a book in it. I never really reported on it. So it wasn't until I got home and there were all these ingredients of that experience and then my life experience too, because as I reveal in the book, and I never really talk about, I was a JCPenney model in my teen years.
Oh, yes. I have seen the photos.
Yeah, there used to be these things called catalogs, and they were like 900 pages, and I've been in many of those, advertising various bedding, sets and cardigan sets and all that. So anyway, there was life experience, I think, that informed how I felt when I was in a very gendered place, and a place where I argue is one of the most extreme beauty cultures in the world. I wanted to kind of tie that all together. And I wish that somebody had written it. And I actually asked my Korean producers, hey, can you find me this book so that I can read the Korean one and then get a translation, because I would like to read about all these issues, feminism and gender inequality and the beauty culture in South Korea and,
And they're like,
the rise
it doesn't
of,
exist.
rise of Korean visual culture, K-pop, K-film, K-drama, and how that's tied into K-beauty. And they were like, okay, there's a book on this. And then there's a book on this, and then there were these
but not
subtopics,
the integration
but
of all
not
these
something that was
threads.
sort of wide-ranging and sweeping and kind of tied all these things together. So
Right.
I ended up just having to do it.
So you land in Seoul in early 2015, and one of the first things you notice as you're looking at the ads and the billboards are these larger-than-life images of a certain look. You call it variations on a prototype.
Yeah.
What is this prototype? Describe it. Put in words.
Sure. It's the long, luxurious hair. It's the porcelain white skin. It's big, bright eyes. A perfect, often kind of chiseled-looking nose, and then a feminine jawline, which in Korea is called the V line. And sometimes when you see K-pop artists pose, they actually put a V like this to emphasize the V of your jaw, if you've seen that particular selfie pose. And then a thinness standard that was really rather alarming to me. I ended up learning that the standard weight for women should be around 50 kilograms, which is 110 pounds or less.
And we're talking about women 5'3" to 5'6".
Right, right.
I mean, I haven't weighed 110 pounds since, I think, 7th grade.
And in Korea, it's actually a problem if you don't, because there's something called free size. And free size is the one size of clothing that's available at boutiques. And free size, as we name a chapter, free size isn't free. Free size is a US size too. And so I was made very aware of my largeness. First, I couldn't buy clothes, but also, like, shopkeepers would actually yell large size to me when I was walking up and down the street to indicate that they sold clothes for this giant body of mine. So I felt the fat phobia.
Yeah.
And again, this was part of my daily experience and not something that was a journalistic pursuit or a journalistic focus until now. So
Okay, and we're going to get into sort of the psychological and social effects of that culture, that beauty standard being imposed. But I want to get into the economics piece because I was so amazed. I knew that the K-beauty industry was huge. But when I read your book, I learned just how colossal it was, and the speed with which products are just spit into the marketplace was astonishing. I mean, it's globally unmatched, right? In terms of K-beauty products.
in terms of
beauty
R&D,
products.
yes.
Yeah.
In terms of R&D, it is unmatched. I think Korean beauty companies, don't catch me lying, but I believe the stat is spend 67% of their budgets all on R&D and aggressive market testing in order to put products to market faster and then retire the ones that don't work faster. And so you're seeing new things on the shelves and products go away much faster than you would from Estee Lauder or L'Oreal and some other giants. But just within the last few years, so since I've moved back in 2018, South Korea has become the world's third largest cosmetics exporter. It's now exporting a higher volume of cosmetics than smartphones. And so if you remember, when I went to Seoul in 2015, I remember thinking of South Korean exports as LG TVs or Hyundai and Kia cars, and then Samsung, right?
Yeah.
Samsung phones. Yeah. And now K-beauty products have surpassed that. And it's largely underreported, but it's a huge driver of revenue to the country.
Exactly. And that was another fascinating piece, that a lot of the ubiquity of the K-beauty industry globally has been in large part thanks to the South Korean government. It's part of the cultural export to boost their own economy. It's not just K-beauty, it's K-pop.
That's right.
Soap operas.
It's part of the Hallyu wave. So the Hallyu wave is the term that's used to describe the Korean wave, which includes K-pop, K-drama, K-film, K-food, other kinds of entertainment like media, what is it called? Gaming and animation. But K-beauty has really ridden that wave because so much of K-culture, K-pop and K-film and K-drama especially, is visual. And so you're exporting all these images of beautiful Koreans, which then makes the celebrities and the idols more popular, and then their looks and how they sort of achieve those looks more popular. And K-beauty is not just products. It's also lots of high-tech lights and wands. And so there's this Iron Man looking helmet, basically, mask that you can wear. That's an LED mask that you've probably seen in. It's it's supposed to like smoothen and brighten your skin.
Oh God,
whatever it is, but it's worn on K-dramas, like as product placement. Like suddenly, suddenly the star is just suddenly like oh, I'm gonna
put my
it has nothing
on.
to do with the plot. It's like, let me just put on this Iron Man mask for the night. And so all of these things are kind of tied together. It's part of exporting the image, but not just exporting the image and products and looks, but also these newfangled technologies and inventions for medical aesthetics to improve your looks.
So fascinating. Okay, so that gets me right to skin. We're going to go through different body parts, but skin is like queen. The skin is foundation of everything, I feel like, in terms of K-beauty. And what was fascinating to read about skin in your book is there is this fundamental desire for truly unblemished skin. There was this quote here from a woman, Christine Chang, who co-founded a Korean beauty brand, and she explains the look of glowy skin. Glowy skin is like the look you want these days, and this is how she describes it, quote, "It's when your skin is so healthy, even-toned, and plumped with hydration that it is almost translucent, like a shard of glass." Elise, I literally wrote "holy crap" in the margin of my book because I was like, that's so impossible. And that yet is the standard. What is glowy skin? Just give us the look. What is like? It's like dewy. It's a little moist. A little.
Yeah, it almost looks slick.
Why would I want to look wet? I mean,
because it's youthful and right. And the idea is that it helps you look younger because of the 4 beauty pillars. There's basically 4 global beauty pillars. They are firmness, thinness, smoothness, and youth. And thinness and youth are quite connected to one another, and smoothness and youth also are. And glowy skin sort of follows that idea that it kind of helps you reach at least 2 out of 4 of the pillars. But this point that you make, like, God, this sounds impossible and it seems like a lot of work, is exactly a theme that runs across the book, which is that the labor, the aesthetic labor that we do on our bodies, whether it's primping or plucking or waxing or dyeing or regimenting our bodies by fasting, whatever it is, that is labor. And I think that so often we don't notice it, or we passively participate in it, or it's sold to us as wellness. And yet we're spending a lot of money and time and energy on it. And so it's labor that not only that we don't just do for free, but we pay to do.
I mean, I got sucked into it because there was this part where you talk about Charlotte Cho's 10-step skincare routine. And this is done twice a day, right? Elise,
and don't
honestly,
quiz me on it because
no, I'm not. I'm about to tell you, I didn't even know there was such a thing as double cleansing until I read your book. And then I went out and I got oil cleanser because at first I was like, no, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to double cleanse my face. But then
it helps take the makeup off.
It
better.
is. Now I've added another step, and I believe me, I have a lot of steps already in my regimen. So thanks, Elise. Now I do oil cleanser before the soap cleanser, and then before the toner, before the serums, before the moisturizer.
It's so funny because one of the most common reactions that I've gotten to the book is something like that, which is, I read the book, and this is just among the small population of folks who have gotten it, sent to them because they're journalists, and has been, I've read the book, and I get that the whole message is rest, and that we should
freedom. Just don't let it inhibit who you are.
Exactly, we should break the link between appearance and worthiness. That there is all kinds of beauty that is spiritual and character driven, and it's way too focused on external beauty now. And yet, I couldn't resist the lure of that thing you mentioned. Yeah. And chapter 3.
Can I just say, Elise gave me a thank you present backstage. That is a K-beauty beauty product.
Right. That's true. It was a nod to something. And so it's like capitalism has an amazing power to absorb its own critiques. And so
well, just in terms of skin, because I also thought this was super fascinating. The unblemished look goes all the way back to Confucianism. And
It
I had
sure
no
does.
idea. What is the connection between Confucianism and unblemished, clear, smooth skin?
It was about class, and just as beauty is a performance of class and gets you into certain doors today, it was certainly a performance of class in a really strict and rigid class hierarchy. And so those who had the whitest, fairest, smoothest skin were also the richest.
Mm-hmm.
And those who had to be outside were laboring and on the fields, and poor them, they had to face sun damage and a tan. And so I write a lot about the history of the whiteness standard, because a lot of the whiteness standard, of course, across the world we've seen is a product of colonialism and those attitudes. But in Asia, the whiteness standard kind of predates colonialism even and goes back to dynastic times because of Asian class hierarchies. And there's a lot of instances like that in the book where we have these assumptions that Asians in Asia want to look white, which was a big.
This is fascinating because I had always thought that, like the double eyelid, which
Yeah.
we're about to. I always thought we like to have double eyelids because it opens up our eyes, and I always thought the desire was so we could look more Western.
Well, according to the Western foreign correspondents.
Right. No, exactly. But you talked to scholars, historians who said actually not necessarily.
Yeah, because if you think about it, it's not that Asians monolithically don't have double eyelids. Actually, half of all Asians are born with double eyelids. So why couldn't you want to actually look like your mom or the local celebrities? Why is the assumption that you want to look like whoever the star is, Elle Macpherson in the 90s or whoever it was that folks were assuming Asians wanted to look like? And so to a person, the cosmetic surgeons and the women in Asia are like, no, I've never aspired to look white. I want to look like the best looking among my group of people, which are other Asians.
Right.
And so we unpack that a little bit. But this is a tangled knot because the whole history of double eyelid surgery is really fascinating and is kind of rooted in this idea of Orientalism, because the second person who claims to have invented it, it was invented twice, basically. It was first invented by a Japanese surgeon in 1895. But then most people trace the origin of the double eyelid surgery to a U.S. Marine surgeon who was posted at Yongsan, which is the base in Seoul. And he was posted there after the Korean War. And he was really there to work on fixing cleft palates for the most part. And this is to say nothing of how cosmetic surgery as a practice came out of war. So we do have to remember the geopolitical influences of everything. So it is a quite tangled knot. But David Millard, who is this Marine surgeon, was originally working on sex workers or operating for free on sex workers who were servicing the U.S. military. And he claims to have invented the double eyelid surgery in the 50s for the male gaze, for the U.S. male gaze. And so at the time, the attitudes there were rather complicated.
Yeah.
But by now, it's evolved to a very specific local Asian standard.
I mean, it took such a hold for me at such an early age. I was born with very
You have a double eyelid.
I do now, but when I was younger, swear to God, I didn't have double eyelids. Every once in a while, I would wake up in the morning and one eyelid might be folded. So I used to stare at myself from the mirror when I was little, and I used to take the end of a tweezer and just stick it into my eye socket to try to force my lid to fold. And I would just hold it in place, just hoping my skin would take, like the fold would take. And sometimes it would stay for a little bit, but I just remember that so vividly, like, please let me have a double eyelid. And then as I grew older, I have it's you have really distinct double eyelids.
It depends. It's like the spacing.
Exactly.
And when you get them surgically made, you can choose. You can.
Oh my
choose
God!
how much-
I just discovered this year before going to the Oscars that there's eyelid tape. You can literally tape your eyelid into a double.
I was going to say you didn't need to do that. See, now I'm selling beauty products that I'm fundamentally against, but you didn't need to use the tweezers because there's eyelid tape for that, my friend.
I know, exactly. But I don't know how to apply it. I'd have to hire someone. But this all brings me to this larger issue of plastic surgery in Korean society, which also I found fascinating. Can you just tell people how incredibly packed with plastic surgeons Gangnam. Am I saying right? Is it Gangnam or Gangnam?
Gangnam.
Okay. This is a very wealthy district in Seoul. How packed with plastic surgeons is that one district in Seoul?
It is the most mature plastic surgery market in the world. I was just reading a Harvard Medical Review study this week that indicated 25% of all cosmetic surgeries performed in the world today are performed in South Korea.
That's insane.
Highest per capita number of plastic surgeons in the world. No other country comes close. More than Brazil, 4 times more than the United States. And owing to the competition and the fact that people all over the world go to get plastic surgery there, they are really fast and really good and constantly inventing new techniques. And I quote a surgeon there. What?
There is a surgery for resting bitch face.
Yes, they invented that.
I mean, to correct it, not to impose it.
Clarification.
I was amazed.
Yeah, like puts your face in a permanent smile.
Even when you're relaxed.
Yes.
Like
There is no problem, no perceived problem with your appearance that Seoul and this district can't fix. But of course, the problem is that it makes you aware when you are medicalizing all these solutions.
100%.
It makes you aware of problems that you didn't even think you had.
I didn't even know jaw surgery, literally shaving down your jawline so it takes a certain shape, your bone structure takes a certain shape. I didn't know that until reading your book. I feel so ignorant. Is this a thing for Chinese people too, or is it mostly a Korean
in the
thing?
U.S. now it's achieved without surgery, buccal fat removal. Buccal fat, which you might have read about in the New York Times. It is the hot facial trend. A lot of stars are doing it, but it's a practice in which I feel like, and we talk about this in that same chapter. In the same way that we follow trends for fashion, what you see happening in South Korea is they're following trends for the face and body. So it's like you're getting filler or you're removing filler. Right. Or you're changing this area, but then when it's not cool, you're changing it back. So the same way that trend culture works for shoes or for clothing is now reaching into our skin and tissue and sometimes our bones. And that's something that I think that we should watch for because it's not just happening in South Korea. They just kind of got to it first, which was a lot of the justification for this book. What I noticed was you saw again and again how your digital self, so the way that you looked online or the way that you wanted to present yourself was superseding or more important, taking privilege over your physical self. And then because we are entering this time of more visuality and a more virtual world. And I was seeing that in Seoul in the mid-10s, but the same is true of America in 2020 and beyond. Right. I mean, so often we are learning what the beauty standards are, what we should look like from copies and copies and copies of attractive people that are shown to us again and again and again by our algorithms and our filters. Because the filters are also promoting smoothness and firmness and thinness and youth.
And the crazy thing is those digital images are often enhanced. So then when we fall in love with our digital avatar, after we've touched up something or, like adjusted the lighting, smoothed the skin, plumped the lips, then we actually want to look like that.
Exactly. And that's exactly what was happening in Seoul. Yeah. And it's more accessible in Seoul. So one important point to make is that because of the glutted market, the price points are much lower, which then leads a lot of folks to ask, why not change your face? Why not change your body? The fix is available for the perceived problem, and it's not out of reach. And so for me, it was the freckles. Freckles are abhorrent. I don't know why.
I think you're so cute on you.
It was constantly like, ooh.
Right.
We could remove that for you. And that's just an example. I just feel like that's really illustrative of how these solutions, once the medical or aesthetic solution exists, then it's sold to you as if it's something, an imperative, like you have to get it if you can solve the problem.
But you also made the argument or the observation that why wouldn't you avail yourself of these procedures, these products to look different? Because you can therefore access, for a lot of these women in Korea, they can access a different class in society. They can access a certain marriage that they otherwise maybe wouldn't have access to. Like, why wouldn't you in a way, what you were saying is that the beauty industry and these beauty standards provide almost a democratization opportunity. You can actually get to the next level if you work on your appearance.
Yeah, it's economically rational for a lot of South Korean women to do the work of changing their appearance because your professional life sort of demands it. It's a place where headshots were required on resumes, and your personal life, there's a lot of pressure around it because, you know, when you go to matchmaking sites or matchmaking agencies, which is a way a lot of Korean people meet, they rank you based on your looks. You know, they use the term specs in the way that we use specs for gadgets. They use specs on your appearance, like your bra size and your height and your weight and your certain aegyo, your cuteness is all ranked. And so it frames, and this is kind of why this is tied into geopolitical and economic issues, and is they frame your appearance, and this happens in the United States too, as a matter of personal responsibility.
Exactly.
So it's like, if you can change your appearance to look better and get ahead, why wouldn't you?
Right. It's just another form of personal striving, self-improvement.
Exactly.
It's not vanity.
And my issue with that is, and we're seeing the debates now in the United States with regard to Ozempic. Ozempic is the diabetes drug that so many celebs are supposedly using off-label in order to lose weight, the Kardashian sisters. And if it is a miracle drug where it can help people lose weight, then one of the arguments is like, well, if nobody has to exist in a large body or be fat, then why not? Like, why not make everybody skinny? But the answer, my response to that is, just as the proper response to racism is not to make everyone white, and the proper response to homophobia is not to make everyone straight, then the proper response to fat phobia, to lookism, appearance-based discrimination, is not to make everybody look exactly the same. Exactly. Because that is not true of the human experience, and it's not true of nature, and we should actually be opening the lens of society and be able to show up as we are, because nobody is going to ever be able to achieve the perfect standard unless you are really, really, really rich, I suppose. And so you're marginalizing so many people, but you're keeping the entire system anxious and exhausted trying to keep up and stay on this hamster wheel of trying to chase appearance standards. And then for any underclasses, they're aspirationally trying to reach it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of an awful inequality too. So it's no way to be.
100%. And it made me curious. I want to talk about you now. It made me curious about how this was personally impacting you as you were living in Korean society, because you're not Korean, you're of Chinese and of Taiwanese descent. Mm-hmm. What did it feel like to live in this society, to not be Korean, but to still look Asian? Did you feel like the rules sort of applied to me, but didn't? Or because you looked Asian, you kind of had to adhere to it?
Yeah.
How did that mix with your sense of everything, like what you look like, what you should look like?
I just couldn't take the privilege of being a full foreigner. You know, because when you appear as a white man in Asia, you know, I feel like you get a pass on so many of the manners, you know, that you're supposed to have,
like, wow,
because it's like, oh yeah, it's just Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. It's like you don't have to dress up. You can be really sloppy, and they just assume, oh yeah, it's probably just a rich white man,
right?
You know,
but
from
you
America.
Should
but
know
for
better.
me, I should know better, right? So I was like mansplained a lot and dismissed sometimes and thrown out of cabs, you know, for being mouthy and like trying to.
You mouthy?
Yeah,
I've never seen that.
I was thrown out of a lot of cabs. They just like wouldn't drive me, and then we would just sit there and be in a standoff. I'm not getting out of your car.
I was amazed that people were staring at you on the subway just because you were wearing a sleeveless shirt, for example.
Yeah, because there's certain expectations, like that your arms are covered up even when it's super, super hot. I was like still nursing, I think, and so I was already like 10 degrees hotter all the time anyway.
But did you feel like, well, we talked about body image and like the just totally unfair weight standards. I mean, 110 pounds. And you have these testimonials, these stories from K-pop stars who talk about these just cruel regimens they were forced to endure to keep their body weight at the bare minimum. And then grueling training, dancing, singing, studying.
So trigger alert if this is difficult for anybody to hear. Yeah,
it was a trigger alert for me. I mean, when I would go to Taiwan as a little girl, my uncle used to grab my arm because I always had like kind of thick, muscly arms. He'd be like, "So much meat. How much does 1 pound of meat cost?" And but weight is like a thing. Well, it's a thing everywhere. I feel like Asian societies really focus on it, but
And this is the extension of why it's problematic to situate looks as a matter of personal responsibility, because then it gets extended to a matter of maternal love if you don't help your child with their looks.
right.
And so this is why so many high school students are gifted cosmetic surgery when they graduate from high school, because you want your child to do well in the same way that you pay for tutoring. You know, everybody goes to cram schools in Korea, the Hagwons, and just in the same way that parents will work hard and sacrifice for their kids to go to Hagwon, they're also working hard and sacrificing to help their kids improve their looks, because it's such an economically competitive and precarious society that it's like, well, we're going to do what it takes. But then maternal love gets framed as shaming you for your body.
Yeah, well, I want my mom to be proud of me, so maybe I need to lose weight. Maybe I need to make my skin clear out, you know?
Yeah, there's a scene in that book, I don't know if you remember, but there was a woman named Hae-in Shim who I interviewed, and she talked about how when she was younger, she was heavier, and her father would have her watch the Miss Korea pageants on TV every night to, quote, learn how to walk. And she would have to watch with her dad every night. And then after a certain amount of time, she would have to walk for him to show that she had learned that, you know, how to walk properly. And I said, what if you just refused? Maybe not, you know, like what if you just said no?
Screw
And
this.
she said, they would have starved me. I feel like they wouldn't have let me eat. And so not like really, you know, not like keeping you away from food, but actually just trying to help you diet, and because it mattered so much. And I think that really, and she actually defends this practice, right? She can see the logic of it. But it
Yeah.
really broke my heart. And there were so many stories like that.
Like, to go back to you, it did make me think about, because you're raising 3 girls now. I'm thinking about your oldest, Ava, who wants to be a dancer and an actor. She's already getting into commercials and short films. And how do you teach a girl? I mean, it's not like LA doesn't have its own lookism. Give me a break, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you teach a girl not to worry about her looks, not to make that paramount, not to be so concerned and consumed by it?
Well, practically speaking, I see that so many of her influences come from social media, right? So, and that's true of her friends as well. And so I'm doing the best I can to actually not give her a phone until she's a little older, because we know the effects of social media on teen girls. And there's more and more studies on this coming out now. But the other kind of overarching idea is you can't teach what you haven't learned for yourself. And there's so many people that I interviewed who talked about kind of hearing from their moms, oh, you're beautiful at any size, or your looks don't matter, but then watching their moms really diet all the time or skip meals or whatever it was. And so that trauma kind of, or that pressure was passed on generation to generation. And so what I take away from that is actually I really have to model a certain lack of bodily shame for my children, and such that they are seeing that rather than just telling them, don't weigh yourself or whatever it is.
Have you shared with them what you've shared in the book, that you struggled with disordered eating when you were a
Totally.
teenager and in early college years? Like, honestly, Elise, I didn't know, we've been friends for many years, I didn't know the extent with which you struggled with disordered eating, and I was really moved by that section of the book. How do you explain what went through Mom's head when you explain that part of your past to your girls?
It hasn't gotten really detailed just because they're so small. They're like 6 and 7 and 10.
Yeah.
But I've tried to put the focus on them kind of and ask them like, well, why do you care if Ava really wants to shave her legs? And I'm like, why do you want to shave your legs? You're going to have to do it for the rest of your life. Yeah, she doesn't really. And she's like, I just want to fit in. I just want to fit in. And that's when I have an opportunity to say like, well, when I wanted to fit in, or if I wanted to, get a job, because Ava does do a little bit of stuff in front of the camera. Like, well, when I wanted to get a job, I tried to fit in a way that was really bad for my body. And then I went hungry and all this stuff. And so I try and just open myself up in a way that maybe I wouldn't have had I not gone on this journey and learned that it's so crucial that we model for our kids hopefully a more open and liberating conversation about our bodies and ourselves, so that they can look in the mirror and remember, like, this is how I look in the mirror is part of who I am, but not the sum total of who I am. And so there's actually two schools of thought on this that now I try to model. And one is called body neutrality, which is all about like, there are no good bodies or bad bodies. They're bodies, and let's celebrate our bodies for what they're capable of, like what they can do. But in order to be inclusive of bodies of all abilities, there's another school of thought called sensualism, which really celebrates what the body can feel and what makes your body feel good kind of from the inside out. And in that framework, exercise isn't about aesthetics, but exercise is about like that feeling after you go on a run and you get runner's high, which is very rare. I really rarely get runner's high, but so maybe that doesn't apply to me personally. But like, just feeling embodied is really important, and we get to that in that vision towards the end of the book. But with the kids, it's just modeling and being curious.
And just last question before we open to your questions. Yeah. Are there any movements in Asia or in Korea specifically that give you hope that there is real introspection about these beauty standards, and some women, even though you point out men are also under their own pressures in Korea, but it is disproportionately something women feel. There are women opting out in a way that is inspiring to you and other people.
Yeah, my final year in Korea, and this kind of goes back to answering your first question, which is why did I write this book? My final year in Korea was a whirlwind year of diplomacy between North Korea and South Korea, and North Korea and the United States, because it started with Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump doing this, my nuclear button is bigger than yours.
Rocket Man. Yeah.
Oh, Rocket Man. He called him Rocket Man. Nickname for everyone.
Of course.
Every despot gets a nickname. And then there was the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, and then the first inter-Korean summit in years. So Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea, and then Kim Jong-un, they met at those blue houses at the border. And then there was the Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump summit in Singapore. And all of this happened in 6 months. It was a wild,
you were on air
whirlwind
constantly,
time.
I remember.
I was. And all the while, there were the largest women's rights rallies in Korean history. 50,000 women, then 80,000 women, then eventually 90,000 women on the third one took to the streets. And I did not cover a single one. I have no sound. NPR has no sound of them because I was so busy doing these national security stories and being off in Singapore. And so I really regretted that, because feminists in Korea are so brave because they face such personal risk and danger by being feminists. 89% of Korean men surveyed just last year said that they would break up with their girlfriends if they learned they were feminists. It's just even saying that you are one is a radical position to take. And these women not only rallied in person, they also rallied online in a movement called Escape the Corset. So a figurative corset where they cut their hair super short and they stopped wearing makeup, and they crushed their compacts and threw them in the trash and took video of it. And then they tallied all the time and money they had spent on trying to look that perfect sort of feminine mold that I described at the start of our time together. And then they just didn't want to do it. They just didn't do it anymore. And they had a hashtag, and this was a big movement kind of following Me Too in the end of 2017. And many of them remain in South Korea fighting this fight despite getting threatened by their bosses, getting asked by their students. There's elementary school teachers who now don't wear makeup and adorn themselves, and their students, their elementary school students are like, why do you look like that? My parents said not to trust you. You know, like these sorts of things, because they look like such rogues. They're taking huge risks. So I really find them inspiring. I find them exceptionally well organized, but they're in small numbers. And I continue to look to them, and I wrote this book sort of with their voices, hopefully at the center, and really want Flawless to be translated into Korean as kind of a tribute to them.
Oh, I hope it does get translated into Korean. Well, I want to open it up to questions. There's so much more to mine in this book.
You all have been such an awesome audience.
Yeah, thanks for laughing at our goofy jokes. We have about 13 minutes for questions. Oh, okay, so we'll just pass the mic around. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm interested in any particular observations you might have had for males in Korea. Thank you.
Yes. So there's a whole chapter called Of Marketing and Men because men are now getting subsumed by this pressure, the lookist pressure in South Korean society. You see it, especially with regard to skincare. Roughly 13% of all skincare products for men in the world are consumed by South Korean men, which is huge because the population is like 50 million and can fit in the space between Los Angeles and San Francisco. So South Korean men are not only following trends, they're also leading trends. The male perm, sort of the success perm, is now crossing over, and we're seeing that in the United States more and more, and that's led by K-pop stars and K-drama stars. The pressure on appearance kind of reaching over into men and reaching over into new demographic groups is a testament to the success of the beauty industry and marketing, right? Because they're problematizing more things just for more groups. Because the women's market is already so saturated. There's something like 8,000 beauty brands for women. And so now it's like, well, you can either grow out beyond your borders and export more across the ocean, which the K-beauty industry is doing, or you can grow within by just creeping into new populations, which is how men are now getting involved.
Thanks for that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thanks so much.
Hi.
I really enjoyed your talk. So what I'm curious about is I was just flipping through your book, and I really appreciated how you were sort of engaging with things like Confucianism and exploring how these issues are not just women's issues, but how they have like very important political and economic connotations. But I think that despite that, I assume there must be kind of a fear that as a female journalist, if you engage with these sorts of issues that are typically seen as like feminine issues, that you might get boxed into sort of only writing about that category or only being questioned about this category of political issue, like especially in an industry that so heavily prioritizes things that are like, you know, what you were talking about earlier, like politics and the economy. So I guess like, was that a fear that you had while writing this book? And if so, has the response you've gotten so far have you been like positively or negatively surprised by it?
Were you
And
concerned
how
you'd be
it's-
dismissed as
yeah,
a radical?
Or just a women's, like a girl
Rabble
reporter,
rousing.
a lady
she's
reporter.
A feminist.
I think that I have covered such a range of beats and topics over the course of my career, and I really started in the so-called hard topics like government and the state legislatures, and then politics, and then tech. That it gave me an easier path to go into and into something that's considered soft. But I will say, and especially after you read the book, that how we show up in the world and what autonomy we have with our bodies is quite political, because it affects whether we speak up, whether we feel good about going to school in the morning, whether we feel good about leaving the house, because bodily shame can keep us from showing up fully in the world. And then and if you multiply that by millions, it is a deadly political issue. I think it's quite serious. And part of the reason why I'm sort of unafraid about it is because I want to use every ingredient that I have in the kitchen as a journalist. And this book allowed me to. So it does tie in my experience as a political reporter and my experience as a tech reporter to take on a topic that's considered soft. And hopefully when you come away from it, we'll find that it's not soft at all.
Great question. I saw a lot of hands. Whoever the mic picks, it's not me.
Yeah,
it's
and
them.
I'll try to answer.
Oh, yeah,
less
and
rambling.
Elise says she's going to make herself available after this talk
to sign
to
and
sign
talk,
books
so
and,
we can.
and yeah,
Thank you
answer
so
more
much
questions.
for this talk. It is so interesting to me. I was wondering, in your research and seeing the trajectory of this, how do you feel about where we're going? Do you feel optimistic that we're going to be able to conquer this? Or do you feel apprehensive about where we're going? Are we going to be able to deal with this and be rational and be kind to each other? How do you
I'm
feel
double
about
cleansing
it?
my face now, thanks to you.
What
kind of progress are you making? Elise?
That's an unintended consequence. There's two ways to answer that. One is that I do worry that in an increasingly visual and virtual society, and then as tech gets better and there are more solutions and more things that we can buy to improve ourselves, that we will just passively do it. And just as we saw with Web 2.0, social tech, it's sort of like Facebook was bad, but we didn't realize it was bad until we all adopted it, right? And so part of the reason why I cover tech and the lens that I cover tech with is to look ahead and try and consider the implications of these things before they've done a lot of harm and done a lot of damage. But they are already doing harm. So that's kind of the side, that's the way I would kind of frame it as like pragmatic or maybe less hopeful. But the hopeful side of me, or the more hopeful answer to that, is I wouldn't have written the book unless I believed that change can happen and that nothing is inevitable, right? Like nothing we think is inevitable necessarily is. And so we have an opportunity to have these conversations, which I'm doing all over the country, and then I'm joining in a much larger conversation about bodily autonomy and bodily shame and how to liberate ourselves from that and how to take these issues seriously in hopes that we don't just passively follow the next solutions into smoother skin and smoother brains.
Hi, first of all, I love the sound of both of your voices. It makes me just feel like I'm in my car and listening. And it's Ailsa Chang, of course.
Thank you.
So thank you both, and this is a great talk. I'm wondering about the statistics maybe of suicide, and maybe the what you found to be maybe the relationship of suicide attempts, suicidal ideations in Korean women, and compare that to American women who are getting less surgery, but under the same pressures.
Korean young people, I can't remember the age cutoff. I think it's like 18 to 30, maybe 15 to 30. And then Korean old people, like 65 and up, have the highest rate of suicide in the developed world. So in the 27 countries that are part of the OECD. So young people and old people. And the explanations of this really vary, but the suicide numbers started going up after the 1997 Asian financial crisis in South Korea, where Korea went bankrupt. And then afterwards, there was this increasing economic pressure across the system, across society. And that led to really high pressure on education and the 9-hour test that Koreans have to take in order to get into college. The Korean SAT is called the Sunung, and they shut down Korean airspace that day so that no planes will disturb students who are taking the test because it is so high stakes.
Right.
And so the high stakes, the all work, no play, those are factors that are involved. And this is the second night in a row that I've gotten that question. So it's obviously there's no like easy explanation for why these numbers are so high, but I can report them.
Right. Another distinct statistic, did you also say that Korean women are the skinniest women?
In the developed world as well. So just as the rest of demographics, so men, women from all 27 of the developed countries that are part of the OECD have seen BMI go up, there's one group, one demographic that has seen BMI go down, and that's Korean women between the ages of 18 and 35. The rates of underweight Korean women after the 1997 financial crisis, in the decade after the 1997 financial crisis, underweight women, the percentage of underweight women rose 60%.
It's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, yeah, I can read it.
And I promised to read that.
But
But
for the audience.
did you interview anyone, whether within the industry or not, who dismiss these concerns, that think that this focus on beauty and perfection is only good and
Good question.
there's not anything psychologically or culturally damaging?
When I tried to talk to industry folks about kind of more complicated implications, they would focus on how great it is for the Korean economy. So they would say, sure, lookism is bad and there's a lot of pressure on all of us to look good. And every time I see anybody, the first comments they make are about my appearance, like, why are you wearing glasses or whatever it is. But then they'd say, but you could also see it as excellent for innovation because we're constantly coming up with new ways.
Yeah.
So there is this sense of like the market above all costs.
So when I wear makeup, it's for empowerment or to express my sexuality, and I just wondered if you saw that in the women. Like, yes, obviously there's the need to keep abreast, but did you encounter like, but I'm doing this for my own empowerment and individuality, and I want to express myself, and I want to be a sexual being.
Yeah.
Or is that, along with that Confucian piece, just this classist virtue kind of thing? Was it more in that realm?
It's hard to untangle these things, right? Because ultimately what I write about is I don't think we should all just like stop wearing makeup, you know? This is not a polemic. What I write about at the end is that progress to me would look like being able to adorn yourself how you want, but also being able to not adorn yourself if you didn't want to and opt out without paying a price. Right now, the issue is that you have to look one specific way, and that not only are the standards a problem, the fact that women and men are still defined by their appearance is the problem. Right. And so it's a matter of being able to appear as we want to appear and be safe in our bodies. There were transgender women that I talked to. There were North Korean refugees that I talked to who really did have to appear femme and do the work of appearing the standard in order to be safe in their bodies, right? And to not be under threat. And so, you know, I affirm however people want to appear. The issue right now is it's hard to believe that everybody wants to appear the exact same way.
I mean, look at this cover. Can you tell people the story behind this face? This amalgamation of all the ideal facial traits?
Yes, people have asked me. This was an iStock photo. So we don't know who this woman is. And I don't know if she's like walking around and now seeing herself in bookshelves. Like, that looks familiar. But it does look kind of AI generated, which was why we chose this for a cover. But
it's a ubiquitous look.
It is kind of the ideal sort of Asian beauty. And one of the additions that I made in the cover design was the addition of the lines, because women's body parts get broken down into alphabets, like ideal alphabets. So it's the V line for the face, but also the S line for how you're supposed to look in profile, the X line for how skinny your waist is supposed to look. And so we're like suddenly a collection of fragments that are named after letters of the alphabet. So I wanted to make sure. And then also when you go in to get a cosmetic surgery consultation, there's just like a little body and a little face drawn, you know, like a line drawing of a face and a line drawing of a body, and you're just supposed to mark on it where you want work.
That is
which
hilarious.
Is wild. Yeah.
Maybe one more question, because we're at 8 o'clock, but anyone? I won't pick.
I know.
You do the dirty work, Becca. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Going off that topic of kind of partializing and the partialism of beauty, was there a specific moment or even surgery or experience that you saw in your early time in South Korea that really made you say, wow, these stringent standards are a little bit elevated compared to even the neighboring areas?
Baby facial, maybe, Elise?
It was the Botox for the body parts. So we're all used to Botox for like frown line and forehead creases because it paralyzes the muscle, right? But in South Korea, the second most popular place to get Botox are your trap muscles, trapezius muscles, because if you get rid of that muscle or you kind of like make it not as prominent, it's supposed to elongate your neck.
Oh my God.
So it's supposed to make your neck look longer. And then the third most popular place to get Botox are your calves.
That blew me away.
So that your calf was skinnier to make your legs look longer. So for a long time, I had been hearing that Blackpink and Girls' Generation, these K-pop
girl
idol
bands.
groups, were getting Botox injections in their legs. And it turns out that's a common practice to make your legs look longer. And there's a great section on legs and we can't get to it here, but legs have really become a showpiece item, kind of a soft power flex for South Korea, a way to show like, because they're so prominent in K-pop videos and formations that now they're a way to project Korea's kind of cultural exports to the rest of the world in a really prominent way.
It's amazing that they want flabby calves.
Skinny, not flabby, skinny.
Relaxed and gooey. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Elise Hu, her new book is flawless.
Ailsa
Everyone should read it.
Chang.
Everyone should read it.
I'm going to take a quick video.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. Everybody
All right.
wave at us.
Yeah, we behaved long enough.
Thank you all.
I love it. We're so in our element right now, Elise. Oh my God. Yes. Thank you for humoring us.
So much. And I'm going to stick around for a signing somewhere in the back.
You can ask her more questions.